Have you ever noticed how sometimes a single sentence can ruin your entire day? You wake up feeling fine. Nothing terrible has happened. Everything seems normal. Then you pick up your phone and see a negative comment. Maybe it's criticism from a stranger. Maybe it's a disrespectful remark from a coworker. Or maybe it's just a message someone read but never replied to. And suddenly, your mood changes. You start thinking about it. You replay the conversation over and over in your mind. You wonder if you did something wrong. You try to figure out what that person really thinks of you. And the strange thing is, the person who upset you may already be going about their day as if nothing happened. They've forgotten the entire interaction. But in your mind, it keeps living on. The same thing happens when your efforts go unnoticed. When you're misunderstood. When you're rejected. When someone else succeeds where you wanted to succeed. When life refuses to unfold the way you expected. We usually assume those things are what make us suffer. But the Stoics saw something different. They realized that what truly makes people unstable is not what happens around them. It is how much power they hand over to what happens around them. Think about that for a moment. If a compliment can make you feel incredibly happy, then a criticism can also make you miserable. If someone else's approval makes you feel valuable, then their rejection can make you feel worthless. In other words, your emotional life is no longer in your hands. It is in theirs. And this is exactly what the Stoics considered one of the most dangerous forms of slavery. In this video, we're going to explore 10 Stoic principles that helped people remain calm in the face of war, betrayal, loss, and chaos. Not so you can become emotionless, not so you can stop feeling, but so you can become the kind of person who is not easily shaken by whatever happens around them. Nearly 2,000 years ago, the most powerful man in the world would wake before sunrise and write private notes to himself. He wasn't writing for an audience. He wasn't writing to build a reputation. He wasn't writing to impress anyone. He was writing because he was fighting a battle. Not a battle against enemies. Not a battle against rival nations. But a battle against his own mind. That man was Marcus Aurelius, the Emperor of Rome. A ruler whose authority stretched across vast territories and millions of lives. From the outside, it seemed as though he had everything a person could want. Power, status, respect, influence. Yet when you look closely at his life, you discover something surprising. Marcus faced many of the same struggles we face today. He was criticized. He was betrayed by people he trusted. He lost loved ones. He carried the weight of war, disease, political conflict, and uncertainty. His life was anything but peaceful. And that's exactly what makes his story so important. Because Stoicism was never created for comfortable times. It was forged in difficult ones. Many people misunderstand what it means to be Stoic. They imagine someone cold, someone detached, someone who feels nothing. But that isn't Stoicism. A Stoic still feels pain, still feels disappointment, still experiences grief, fear, and loss. The difference is that they refuse to let those emotions take control of their lives. They don't allow one bad moment to ruin an entire day. They don't allow one criticism to destroy their confidence. They don't allow one setback to define who they are. In other words, they become difficult to shake. And that's what this video is really about. Not becoming emotionless, not becoming indifferent, but becoming steady in a world that is constantly trying to pull you off balance. The 10 principles you're about to learn are some of the most powerful mental tools the Stoics used to build that kind of strength. Because peace of mind is not something you're born with. It is something you train. And like any skill, it grows stronger every time you practice it. Rule 1. Stop needing approval. Let me ask you a question. Where does your sense of worth come from? Most people would immediately say it comes from their character, their values, their abilities, the kind of person they are. But if you look closely, you'll often find something very different. Many people have unknowingly placed their self-worth in the hands of others. They feel confident when they're praised. They feel important when they're noticed. They feel valuable when they're approved of. And at first, that seems harmless. In fact, it feels good. The problem is that the moment your happiness depends on approval, your suffering depends on disapproval. The moment someone else's opinion can lift you up, it can also bring you down. One compliment makes your day. One criticism ruins it. One person believes in you, and you feel unstoppable. One person doubts you, and suddenly you begin doubting yourself. This is the trap Marcus Aurelius warned against. He understood that anyone who depends on external validation can never be truly free, because their emotional state is constantly being controlled by forces outside themselves. Today, they feel confident because they are admired. Tomorrow, they feel insecure because they are ignored. Today, they feel strong because they are accepted. Tomorrow, they feel weak because they are rejected. Their inner world rises and falls with the opinions of strangers. That isn't strength. It's dependency. The Stoics took a different path. They focused less on being admired and more on being honorable. Less on being praised and more on being worthy of praise. They understood that respect from others may come and go, but self-respect must remain. So ask yourself this: if nobody applauded your efforts, would you still keep going? If nobody noticed your progress, would you still continue improving? If nobody approved of the life you're building, would you still choose that path? Because the moment your answer becomes yes, something changes. You stop living for approval and start living from conviction. And that is the beginning of real inner strength. The strongest people are not the ones who receive the most admiration. They are the ones who no longer need it. Rule 2. Let people think what they want. One of the most exhausting battles you'll ever fight is not a battle with circumstances. It's a battle with other people's opinions. Maybe you've experienced this before. Someone misunderstood your intentions. Someone judged you based on a single moment. Someone repeated a story about you that wasn't entirely true. And what is our first instinct? To explain, to defend ourselves, to make sure everyone understands our side of the story. We spend hours replaying conversations in our heads, days thinking about what we should have said, weeks trying to correct how someone sees us. But here's a difficult truth. You can control your actions. You can control your words. You can control your character. But you cannot control how other people interpret them. Two people can witness the exact same event and walk away with completely different conclusions. That's human nature. And no amount of explaining will ever change that completely. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than most. Despite being the emperor of Rome, he was criticized. He was misunderstood. He had people who doubted him, people who disliked him, people who questioned his decisions. Think about that for a moment. If one of the most powerful and respected men in history could not make everyone approve of him, what makes us think we can? The truth is simple. Some people will misunderstand you. Some people will dislike you. Some people will judge you without knowing the full story. And some people will never see you for who you truly are. The sooner you accept this, the lighter life becomes. Because freedom begins when you stop trying to manage your image in everyone else's mind. The Stoics didn't spend their lives chasing approval. They focused on living according to their principles. They understood that reputation lives in other people's heads, but character lives within you. And character is the only one you truly control. When you stop trying to be understood by everyone, you reclaim an enormous amount of energy. Energy to grow, energy to build, energy to live, energy to become the person you were meant to be. Because peace often begins at the exact moment you stop needing everyone else's permission to be yourself. And if that idea resonates with you, type this in the comments: I choose to be myself. Because that simple decision is often the first step toward real inner freedom. Rule 3. Separate reality from interpretation. Most people believe they are reacting to reality. But more often than not, they are reacting to their interpretation of reality. And this simple distinction may be one of the most powerful lessons in all of Stoicism. Let's take a very ordinary example. You send someone a message. An hour passes. No reply. A few more hours go by. Still nothing. By the end of the day, the message remains unanswered. Now pause for a moment and ask yourself, what is the actual fact? The fact is simple. A message has not been answered yet. That's all. Nothing more. But what usually happens next? The mind starts writing a story. Maybe they're ignoring me. Maybe they're upset with me. Maybe I said something wrong. Maybe they don't respect me anymore. Maybe they don't want me in their life. Within minutes, a simple event turns into an entire drama playing inside your head. And here's the interesting part. The suffering rarely comes from the event itself. It comes from the meaning you attach to it. This is exactly what Epictetus was talking about when he said that people are disturbed not by things, but by the views they take of them. Two people can experience the same setback and walk away with completely different emotions. One person sees failure and concludes that they're not good enough. Another person sees failure and treats it as feedback. Same event. Different interpretation. Different outcome. The Stoics trained themselves to notice this difference. Whenever strong emotions appeared, they would stop and ask, what actually happened? Not what I fear happened. Not what I imagine happened. Not what my anxiety says happened. What actually happened? That question creates space between you and your emotions. And in that space, clarity begins to appear. Because many of the battles we fight are not against reality. They are against stories we created about reality. Stories that may not even be true. The more clearly you learn to separate facts from interpretations, the less power, fear, anxiety, and overthinking will have over your life. And the harder it becomes for the outside world to shake your inner peace. Rule 4. Master the pause. There is a tiny moment hidden inside every argument, every burst of anger, and every difficult situation you face. Most people never notice it. Yet that moment often determines whether you remain in control of yourself or become a prisoner of your emotions. It is the space between what happens to you and how you respond to it. Someone insults you. Someone criticizes you. Someone treats you unfairly. And almost instantly, a reaction begins to rise. You want to defend yourself. You want to prove them wrong. You want to strike back. You want to protect your pride. This reaction feels natural. In fact, it feels automatic. But according to the Stoics, this is precisely where true strength is revealed. Not in the reaction itself, but in your ability to pause before reacting. Epictetus taught that the first task is not to respond. The first task is to observe. That sounds simple, yet it may be one of the hardest skills a person can develop, because emotions always demand immediate action. Anger wants a response right now. Fear wants a decision right now. Pride wants revenge right now. The emotional mind is impatient. It wants movement. The Stoic mind wants clarity. It wants understanding before action. Think about how many regrets in life were created in a moment of emotional urgency. A text message sent in anger. A decision made in frustration. A relationship damaged by words that could never be taken back. Most of those mistakes were not caused by the situation itself. They were caused by the absence of a pause. Imagine a Roman soldier being insulted in front of a crowd. The weakest person reacts first. The strongest person pauses first. Because strength is not measured by how quickly you strike. It is measured by how completely you control yourself. The Stoics understood that emotions are like waves. If you immediately throw yourself into them, they carry you away. But if you stand still long enough, the wave begins to lose its force. The next time someone provokes you, try something different. Do not answer immediately. Do not react immediately. Do not decide immediately. Give yourself space. A few minutes, a few hours, even a day if necessary. You may discover that what felt unbearable in the heat of the moment becomes insignificant once emotion fades, because within that small pause lies one of the greatest powers a human being can possess: the power to choose. And that power is where an unshakable mind begins. Rule 5. Expect difficulty before it arrives. One of the biggest reasons people get knocked down by life is not because the challenge is too great. It's because they never saw it coming. Most of us walk through life carrying an invisible expectation. We expect things to go according to plan. We expect people to behave reasonably. We expect our efforts to be rewarded. We expect the people we trust to stay loyal. And when those expectations are broken, we suffer. Not only because of what happened, but because we never imagined it would happen at all. A relationship ends. A trusted friend betrays us. A career opportunity disappears. A setback arrives without warning. And suddenly, we feel as though life has treated us unfairly. The Stoics approached life differently. They were not pessimists, but neither were they naive optimists. They understood that difficulty is not an exception to life. It is part of life. Marcus Aurelius advised himself each morning to expect difficult people, selfish people, ungrateful people, dishonest people, not because he hated them, but because he refused to be surprised by them. Seneca practiced something similar. He would regularly imagine possible hardships before they happened: loss, failure, disappointment, rejection. Not because he wanted those things to occur, but because he wanted to train his mind to face them calmly if they did. Most people prepare for success. Few prepare for adversity. They prepare for the promotion, but not the setback. They prepare for the victory, but not the defeat. And when reality fails to match their expectations, they collapse under the weight of shock. The Stoic, however, remains steadier, because they understand something important. The obstacle is not proof that life is going wrong. The obstacle is proof that life is happening. When you stop treating hardship as an abnormal event, it loses much of its power over you. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and begin asking, "How should I respond to this?" That single shift changes everything. Because resilience is not built when life is easy. It is built when you learn to expect challenges without fearing them. And if you're committed to developing that kind of mindset, type this in the comments: "I am ready for the challenge." Because the moment you stop demanding an easy life, you begin building a stronger mind. Rule 6. Stop taking everything personally. There is a habit that causes far more suffering than most people realize. The habit of making everything about ourselves. Someone seems distant. We assume we did something wrong. Someone responds with a cold tone. We assume they're upset with us. Someone rejects an idea we shared. We assume they're rejecting us as a person. Without realizing it, we place ourselves at the center of every story. And that creates an enormous amount of unnecessary pain. Think about how often this happens. A friend takes longer than usual to reply. Your mind immediately begins searching for explanations. Maybe they're angry. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe you've done something wrong. Yet in reality, they may simply be busy. They may be dealing with problems you know nothing about. They may be fighting battles that have absolutely nothing to do with you. The Stoics understood something that most people forget. The vast majority of people are preoccupied with their own lives, their own fears, their own frustrations, their own struggles. They are not spending nearly as much time thinking about you as you imagine. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that people act according to the understanding they possess at that moment. When someone behaves badly, it usually reveals more about their inner condition than it does about your worth. A rude person may be carrying anger. A bitter person may be carrying pain. A selfish person may be carrying insecurity. This doesn't excuse harmful behavior. Stoicism is not about becoming passive. It simply means refusing to absorb someone else's emotional state as if it were your own. The Stoic learns to observe without internalizing, to witness anger without becoming angry, to hear criticism without allowing it to define their identity, to experience rejection without using it as evidence of their inadequacy. This is a subtle skill, but it changes everything. Because once you stop taking every reaction personally, you begin to see people more clearly. You stop asking, "What does this say about me?" and start asking, "What might this reveal about them?" That shift creates freedom. Freedom from overthinking. Freedom from constant self-doubt. Freedom from carrying emotional burdens that were never yours to carry. And the less personally you take the behavior of others, the less power they have to disturb your peace. Because an unshakable person understands that someone else's mood does not determine their value. Rule 7. Build your inner citadel. Imagine living in an ancient city during a time of war. Outside the walls, there is chaos, noise, conflict, uncertainty. At any moment, danger could appear without warning. But at the center of the city stands a fortress, strong, protected, difficult to penetrate. A place built to endure, even when everything around it is falling apart. Marcus Aurelius believed that every human being needs a fortress like that. Not in the outside world, but within themselves. He called it the inner citadel. A place inside your mind that remains untouched by the constant turbulence of life. A place you can return to when the world becomes loud, confusing, and overwhelming. The problem is that most people never build this fortress. Instead, they allow their peace to exist entirely outside themselves. A negative comment ruins their day. A rejection ruins their week. A setback destroys their confidence. Their emotional state rises and falls with circumstances they cannot control. As a result, they become fragile, not because life is unusually difficult, but because they have no inner foundation strong enough to withstand it. The Stoics took a different approach. They understood that if your peace depends on circumstances, your peace will always be temporary. If your confidence depends on success, your confidence will always be vulnerable. If your happiness depends on approval, your happiness will always be unstable. So they focused on building something deeper. They strengthened their character. They strengthened their discipline. They strengthened their ability to remain calm when everything around them was not. Day by day, they built an inner fortress that no criticism could easily enter, no insult could easily damage, no setback could easily destroy. This doesn't mean they stopped feeling pain. Marcus Aurelius still experienced grief, loss, disappointment, fear. But those experiences never became larger than the person experiencing them. Because beneath every storm, there was still something solid, something steady, something unshaken. Ask yourself this: where does your peace currently live? Does it live in your bank account? Your reputation? Your relationships? Other people's opinions? Or does it live within you? Because the person who becomes unshakable is not the one who avoids every storm. It is the one who carries a fortress within, wherever they go. And when that fortress is strong enough, the world may shake around you, but it can no longer shake you. Rule 8. Control only what is yours. If there is one idea that sits at the very heart of Stoicism, it is this: some things are within your control, and some things are not. Simple. Yet most human suffering begins the moment we forget that distinction. Think about how much energy people spend fighting battles they can never win. They try to control how others see them. They try to control outcomes. They try to control the future. They try to control the past. They try to control circumstances that were never theirs to command in the first place. And the harder they try, the more frustrated they become. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you stop demanding control over what was never yours. You cannot control what other people think of you. You cannot control whether someone appreciates your efforts. You cannot control whether life unfolds exactly according to your plans. You cannot control every obstacle that appears on your path. But there are things you can control. Your choices, your actions, your effort, your character, your response. And that is where the Stoics place their attention. Most people ask, how can I make life go my way? The Stoic asks, how can I respond wisely no matter which way life goes? That shift may sound small, but it changes everything. Because when your peace depends on results, you become anxious. When your peace depends on circumstances, you become fragile. When your peace depends on your own conduct, you become resilient. Imagine trying to hold water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. Many people live like that. The more they try to control everything around them, the more powerless they feel. The Stoic does the opposite. They release what isn't theirs and strengthen what is. They stop fighting reality and start mastering themselves. That is why this principle remains one of the most practical lessons Stoicism has to offer. Because every day, life presents you with the same choice. Will you waste your energy on what you cannot control? Or will you invest it in what you can? If this principle is something you need to remember more often, type this in the comments. I focus on what I can control. Because that simple sentence contains enough wisdom to save you from countless unnecessary struggles. Rule 9. Treat praise and criticism equally. Most people want to learn how to stop being hurt by criticism. But very few stop to ask a deeper question. Why does criticism have so much power over them in the first place? The Stoics believe the answer often begins with our relationship to praise. Think about it. If a harsh comment can ruin your day, it means someone else's opinion has power over your emotional state. But if a compliment can make you feel significantly more valuable, important, or confident, then that same power already existed long before the criticism arrived. It simply revealed itself in a different form. Most people see praise and criticism as opposites. The Stoics saw them as two sides of the same coin. Both can become traps, because both can make your self-worth dependent on external approval. Seneca warned about this centuries ago. He understood that anyone who lives for applause will eventually suffer from disapproval. The crowd is unstable. Public opinion changes. People admire you today, ignore you tomorrow, celebrate you one year, forget you the next. If your identity depends on their approval, your peace will always be fragile. The Stoic response is not to reject praise, nor is it to ignore criticism. Instead, they learn to keep both in perspective. When praised, they remain grounded. When criticized, they remain composed. They listen. They reflect. They ask a simple question. Is there truth in this? If the answer is yes, they learn from it. If the answer is no, they let it go. Nothing more is required. Because their goal is not to become universally admired. Their goal is to become a person they can respect. There is a profound freedom that comes when you no longer need praise to feel worthy. Because at that moment, criticism loses much of its power as well. You stop riding an emotional roller coaster controlled by the opinions of strangers. You stop measuring your value through the reactions of other people. And for perhaps the first time, your sense of worth begins to come from within. That is when real independence begins. Not when everyone approves of you, but when their approval is no longer required for your peace. Rule 10. Become smaller than your ego. If the Stoics were asked to identify the greatest obstacle to inner peace, they probably wouldn't point to the outside world. They would point to the ego. Because much of human suffering is not created by what happens. It is created by what the ego believes what happened means. Imagine that someone dismisses your idea during a meeting. What actually happened? A person disagreed with you. That's all. But what does the ego hear? They don't respect me. They think I'm not intelligent. They don't value my opinion. Suddenly, a simple disagreement becomes a threat to your identity, and suffering begins. The ego constantly demands something from the world. It wants recognition. It wants admiration. It wants to be right. It wants to be important. It wants to win every argument. It wants other people to confirm the image it has created of itself. The problem is that life makes no promises to the ego. There will always be people who disagree with you, people who misunderstand you, people who overlook you, people who underestimate you, people who fail to see your value. And if your peace depends on preventing those things from happening, peace will always remain out of reach. This is why the Stoics spent so much time observing their own minds, not because they wanted to destroy the ego, but because they refused to become servants of it. They learned to say, I may be wrong. I don't need to win this argument. I don't need everyone to agree with me. I don't need to prove my worth to every person I meet. Those statements sound simple, but they require tremendous strength. Because the ego is always hungry. It always wants more validation, more attention, more certainty, more control. The Stoic learns to step back from that hunger, to recognize it without obeying it. And something remarkable happens. The smaller the ego becomes, the more freedom appears. The smaller the ego becomes, the less easily offended you are. The smaller the ego becomes, the less power the world has over your emotions. Because no one can manipulate a person who no longer needs constant approval. No one can easily shake a person who is no longer obsessed with protecting an image. And that is why humility is not weakness in Stoicism. It is strength, a quiet strength. The strength of someone who no longer needs the world to confirm who they are, because they already know. If there is one lesson the Stoics wanted us to understand, it is this. True strength does not come from controlling the world. It comes from controlling yourself. You cannot stop people from criticizing you. You cannot prevent disappointment from finding its way into your life. You cannot make everyone understand you. You cannot force the world to be fair. But you can decide how you respond to all of it. And that decision changes everything. Throughout this video, we've explored 10 Stoic principles. Principles that teach you to stop chasing approval, to let people think what they want, to separate facts from the stories you tell yourself, to pause before reacting, to prepare for difficulty, to stop taking everything personally, to build an inner fortress, to focus only on what you can control, to treat praise and criticism with equal calm, and finally, to become smaller than your ego. Each principle points toward the same destination, a mind that remains steady when life becomes unstable, a mind that cannot be easily manipulated by circumstances, opinions, or emotions. Because being unshakable does not mean life stops testing you. It does not mean pain disappears. It does not mean hardship comes to an end. It means that no matter what happens, you remain rooted in something deeper than the event itself. So if you've stayed with me all the way to this point, type this word in the comments. Unshakable. Not for me, for yourself. As a reminder of the kind of person you're choosing to become. And if you want to continue exploring the timeless wisdom of Stoicism, make sure to subscribe and join us for the next journey. Remember this, the day you become unshakable is not the day the world becomes easier. It is the day your mind becomes stronger than the world.